I sat down with my fellow alum from Big Bad Ballou, Mike Locksley. We discuss his days as a Ballou Knight and his journey to becoming the head football coach at the University of Maryland. Coming up next on Sideline Report.
Come up here, the Cap Center. Made a lot of money in these parking lots. Back in those days, Maryland was pretty good. So making $30, $40 scalping tickets was a lot of money. Went to Amadon, Jefferson, down there, the middle school down in the southwest section that's been gentrified. And then when they started renovating the housing projects like Capers and Greenleaf, they started moving you around to renovate. We got moved over to Linda Poland and just finished up there because, like I said, all my friends went to Wilson, all my childhood friends. So I lived over, even though I was living in Linda Poland, I still would go over and play sports at the number 4 Boys and Girls Club because number 11 was our rival.
Number 11 was where
that was our rival.
I know.
Yeah, so black and gold and purple and white.
Yes. All right, welcome to Sideline Report. Marvin Jackson here, and I am with University of Maryland head coach Mike Locksley. Thanks for joining us on Sideline Report, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah. Really excited about this.
Yeah, I got to tell everybody out there, Mike Locksley and I are from the same high school, Ballou High School, Washington, D.C. Big Bad Ballou.
Big Bad Ballou, and say it with your chest out, right?
Yeah, the blue and gold. And tell us about those days when you were back in Southeast and at Ballou High School. I mean, you started out at number 4 Boys Club. I played at number 11 Boys Club and then Ballou. Yeah, talk about those days, man.
It was a little different transition for me because I spent most of my childhood down in the southwest section of the city, the Greenleaf section, K Street, and as you talked about, every section of the city had their Boys and Girls Club that serviced that area. So I grew up a number 4 Viking, as we were called, and number 11 was our arch nemesis. We had a lot of great battles in every sport. Great teams in every sport. And going into my 8th grade year, we ended up being displaced from down southwest, and I ended up over at Linda Poland Memorial Housing Projects there off of Bellevue Street, right there on the Southern Avenue border. And Ballou was the neighborhood high school. So those guys that I grew up battling against, now I'm playing with them at Ballou, and I'm actually battling my old youth friends at Wilson because the neighborhood school for Woodrow,
there was no high school in that area.
It was not. Randall's had closed down, and so Wilson was the neighborhood school for that section of Southwest that we lived in, and I thought I was going there. I went to Jefferson Junior High, and I went to Amadon Elementary, and so it was kind of a weird deal because I went from the southwest section to the southeast section to go to school and playing against my former teammates from the Boys and Girls Club days, and it made it a little tough because, back then the neighborhoods you grew up in were your hood, and you represented them, and I went from one side to the other, but still was representing the side I was most comfortable with, which was down on the southwest side.
I found that fun playing against guys that you had played against in the boys clubs too. I thought because it kind of kept going, like you were playing when you were 12 and 13, and then you end up playing against them again in high school. I thought it was some really good rivalries back in the day.
Tremendous feeder system, and as I always say, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that type of foundation that it was the Metropolitan Police Boys and Girls Clubs at those times, which, as I like to say now, was community policing at its best because, again, the things we learned, the coaches were police officers. Exactly. Yeah. And so those days were very formidable years for me. And as I like to say, growing up with a single parent mom most of my life, those coaches became kind of the father figures. And what do you naturally do as a kid? You want to be what your father was or the men in your life did for a living, and I ended up coaching like Officer Willie Borden and Deleon Fields and Butch Carter, some of these youth coaches that I had growing up.
That's awesome. So you went to Towson.
Yeah.
Now, several guys from Ballou. Towson is Ballou is a feeder to Towson because a lot of people have gone to Towson from Ballou. I knew some guys when I played that went to Towson. How was that experience? And then when did you realize you wanted to coach? Because you coached right away.
I did. And, the Towson experience was one for me. It was far enough away in that it was an hour from home. I had a son very early in my career. As I like to say, don't try this at home. Right. And so it limited kind of how far I wanted to go, and Towson was a perfect fit for me. Mm-hmm. A mid-sized university, PWI institution, which for me was really the first time in my life that I sat in a classroom with people that didn't look like me. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of an acclimation period. The year I went to Towson in '87 was its first year transition into what was then called 1AA football. Towson had been a Division II powerhouse where they had won a few championships. They won a Division III national championship. And so it was a good fit for me, and I was able to go there and have a pretty good career. I was even able to play two sports. My last couple of years there, played both football and basketball at Towson, and it was a good time, and Ballou prepared me for it. I got the money, the scholarship to go to Towson because of my high school coach, Frank Young, who at the time used to invest time in us and drive us to different colleges and for camps and workouts and to meet the coaches. And I can remember we had a kind of a 3-college swing. We went to West Virginia. We left West Virginia. I think we went to Marshall, and then we finished up at Towson. And when I got to Towson, I left there with a scholarship offer, and it was a fit.
Yeah, great. And then, of course, you wanted to coach. I mean, right away.
Yeah, different era too, because very few times do you go from playing with a group of guys to the very next year, I'm in the front of the room. Mm-hmm. Now, I took a circuitous route to this in terms of, I was one of those guys that, I got married at a very young age. I was 22 years old.
So you needed a job.
I had 2 kids. I left college with 2 kids and married. And so probably a little more mature than your average college guy. And as I was winding down my career at Towson, I knew that if I wasn't able to take it to another level, meaning playing pro ball, that I wanted to somehow, some way stay involved with sports. And, I always talk about this perfect storm and how God's plan works itself out for you. The year I finished playing at Towson, my defensive coordinator, Gordy Combs, became the head coach, which then opened up the D coordinator spot, which moved my position coach to become a coordinator, and it opened up a safety or a DB job at Towson. And so I went from playing and graduating to the next year a full-time coach, and my coaching career took off from there. And it's taken me along all over the United States. Yes. And then says provided, as I like to say, it changed the lineage of my life, because I was the first in my family to go to college, and now every one of my kids attended college and all played Division I sports. And it started with the break I got going to Towson and becoming a coach at my alma mater for a year.
You're a natural leader. I can see that, and we're going to talk about that later. But talk about going to Illinois. That's when you were, I don't know, you might have done a lot of recruiting at Towson too, but that's when you really established yourself as a master recruiter. I mean, even I saw something where Friedgen once said, Mike is not a good recruiter. He's a very good recruiter. Right. And, people just say that about you. You brought about 9 guys up to Illinois from the D.C. area.
Yeah, it was quite a few really good players. And the thing the recruiting piece for me, to be a good recruiter, you have to have a great product to sell. Growing up in our neighborhood, you learned how to have the gift of gab. You learned how to communicate. You learned how to have a little swag. And I think people kind of feed off of that. And so I was one of the young coaches, and at that time there weren't a lot of coaches that looked like me. And as you and I both know, the DC area was known more for basketball. And I can remember even my senior year at Ballou High School, where we played in the Eastern Division Championship game against H.D. Woodson in one of the greatest games that happened, because it was a 3 overtime game that took the penetration rules as far as you can take them.
I remember that.
Yeah,
game.
and we lost by a
You
yard
were
or
in
two.
that game.
I was in that game. I had 3 interceptions that game.
Wow.
But what it taught me doing this is that being able to coach and being able to recruit is all about communication. And if people like you, they buy from you. And I'm not a used car salesman. You know, when people give you a recruiter tag, you sometimes get called a salesman. And I wasn't selling a product. I was selling what I just got finished going through as a young black guy that grew up in this area. And a lot of teams didn't recruit this area for major college football. I can think, you know, Johnny Vessels may have been one of the only guys that kind of went to Maryland. And I felt like a place like Maryland didn't necessarily always come into the DC area, recruited the private schools. But I made it a point that when I became a coach, because I knew there was so much talent in this area, a bunch of my teammates went on to HBCU, Central State, where they won championships, and, you know, Hampton and all these different schools. Well, I said to the coach at that time, Ron Vanderlinden, that there's some really under-recruited players that are right here in the city, not necessarily the parochial schools, that if we go get us one of those guys, you're going to find yourself a guy that's not just a street-savvy kid, but a really good athlete that has unlimited growth potential.
Right. And talking about recruiting, you said from our area, guys are pretty good recruiters. I was a pretty good recruiter in my first life in the federal government, bringing people across to DC from all across the country. I also recruited in college. My 3 years that I was a recruiting coordinator, I had the freshman of the year. Okay. So I was a pretty good recruiter. So it must be something about Ballou. You think it, but I think you said all the right things. Communication, people have to like you, and you have to sell a product.
Yeah, and be honest. Because I've learned over the years that the best recruiting I've ever done stems from third-party validation, where somebody that has used the product, attended the university, somebody you've recruited can come back and say, you know what, everything that Coach Locke said he would do for me, he did. And I can think back to even recruiting Vernon Davis to Maryland, leaving and going to Florida, and then recruiting Avante, his brother, to Illinois.
Okay.
And I can remember Miss Adeline, their grandmom who raised them, saying, well, you told me Maryland was the best thing for Duke, and now you're telling me Illinois is the best thing for Avante. And she was kind of confused about it, like, because Maryland was recruiting him. And I said, well, it's about people, Miss Adeline. People make a place. And for Vernon to be able to communicate to Avante, you know what, Coach Locke's, everything he said that they would do, they did and provided. And, you know, that's a good man to go play for, even though I wasn't the head coach. It really helped to have that type of third-party validation.
You know, you're in the Big Ten now coaching. You were at Illinois, Big Ten. Do you ever kind of pinch yourself sometimes? Because I remember Cornelius Green that went to Ohio State. We played baseball in the summer. Played against each other when he was at Dunbar, but in the summer we played with each other. And I remember he said, I'm going to a Big Ten school. And we were like, are you crazy? Nobody's going to want a black quarterback at a Big Ten school back then. And he said, I'm going. And he went, and you remember what happened. They won the Big Ten all 4 years while he was there with Archie Griffin. So we were saying that's a big reach to say you want to go to a Big Ten school. You ended up coaching at Big Ten schools. Do you ever pinch yourself and say, man, look at me? I mean,
you know what? I haven't. And here's what I've learned. Like, the journey is I'm still walking the journey. And I'm sure at some point, and I can tell you this NIL and transfer portal is pushing it faster than I expect, that at some point, you know, I'm on the back end of this career. At some point I'll sit back and look at the things I've been able to accomplish. But while you're in the weeds, as I like to say, not yet. Now, I do tell you, driving in on the campus every day, and when I pull up to my parking spot, every now and then I look at the sign that says Head Coach Michael Locksley, and I kind of smile like, man, I didn't trick these people. I didn't stole me a job. But no, I love what I do, and I don't even see it as a job because it's something that I enjoy doing.
You know, you've had some challenges in your life personal stuff with your son passing away and losing a child. That's a tough thing. But there also were challenges just coming into Maryland because you had to stabilize this program because there had been a player, Jordan McNair, who had passed away.
Even you think of when I got into coaching, and I tell a story how my head coach retired and my D coordinator became the head coach, what created a position. Well, the tragedy of Jordan McNair is how we got to where we are today, where you're even interviewing me, because obviously with Jordan McNair's death, sent Maryland into a whirlwind, and a lot of people aren't here that were part of that process, and it opened up this opportunity. And how ironic it is that I'm coming to a place where 115 kids just lost a brother, and I just spent a year nurturing my own family through the personal tragedy of losing my son Miko. I had the skill set. I knew what needed to be done because I just went through it. And so, as people like to say, adversity is what you learn the most from. And, it was some really tough, raw communication that needed to be had when I lost my son Miko to gun violence. And then it was the same when you come into Maryland and the program was literally left for dead. And I oftentimes say Jordan McNair died a martyr because since his death, we've become probably the safest place in the country to play football because we've been able to learn from the mistakes maybe that were created, and now we've got a lot of processes in place to help prevent it. Well, the same thing can be said with dealing with our players and helping navigate the tough waters of dealing with losing a brother and the trust issues and those things. And, 4 years later, here we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's still going on in our communities, gun violence.
It is.
And you've got to deal with that. A lot of people don't realize how much a coach deals with their players every day, other than football.
I'd say football is the smallest part of what I deal with from these guys. And fortunately for me, I'm recruiting a lot of kids that are like me, first generation college goers that come here with a lot of, as I like to call it, baggage that has to be unpacked. I mean, I can remember going from Ballou High School to being, the only minority sitting in the class at Towson, and I just spent my last 18 years or 12 years of school going to school with just people that look like me, and so that was an acclimation. And it's one that's sometimes a little tougher, and to have someone that has experienced it to navigate and teach these guys when they're coming in. They all come in because they want to go to the NFL, and I love that dream for them, and I'm not a dream killer. And so what I tell them is, you focus on the 12 Saturdays that you're responsible for, and Coach Locksley and the Maryland program will take care of the other 353 days. And it's been a formula that's worked well. We try to do a lot of things to help the acclimation period, to help navigate it. I mean, obviously, these kids have all dealt with personal tragedies at some point, and now it's a matter of teaching them how to turn tragedy into triumph.
What did you learn at Alabama, coaching with Coach Saban?
Man, we'd have to do a 3-part documentary on that. Because,
something, just,
And I say that, I mean, there's so many things.
I know there's a lot.
So many things. And, the thing that I'll say is that there's a reason that they are consistently one of the best programs in the country. And then you look at, as I say, the branches off of his family tree. I'm one of the few minority branches off his tree as an offensive coordinator in his system. But if you look at what Kirby's done at Georgia, what Sark is doing at Texas, Lane at Ole Miss, even Mel, who was a DB coach for him up at Michigan State. We all are, Mario at Miami, we all are somehow, some way doing parts of what we learned by having a chance to be behind the Alabama machine. I'd say if there's the biggest thing that I learned from Coach Saban is, we call it quality controlling, where whenever you have something in your program, whether it's a game, it's recruiting, it's nutrition, it's the weight room, once something happens, you come in, you basically strip it down and say why it worked or why it didn't work. And if it didn't work, figure out the answers to make it work. And so there's a lot of trial and error per se in the program where you create events or programs or systems, and then you have to go in after you execute it to say, did it work how we expected, or is there some tweaking that needs to be done? And so, what I learned is that even at a place like Alabama, where every weekend they had a chance to win and we had a chance to win and we won championships, we didn't just ever rest on our laurel that we're going to show up because we're Alabama and win. We usually have turned over every rock to figure out what it takes to win consistently. And that's what's some of the things I've taken and have tried to implement here.
Winning consistently here at Maryland. What are your expectations this year, and what do you have to look forward to? I know you have some really good recruits. Let's talk about some of the things that you feel good about this year to make Maryland consistently a winner.
For me, it starts first and foremost with the people in the program. Our players, they're the best advocates and the best allies we have in terms of what type of program we're having, because I always say that when it is a player-led team, it's usually a great team. When it's a coach-led team, you're just usually pretty good. And so we've tried to create a player-led culture where, if you really strip down my job, I work for the players. They don't work for me. And a lot of people have it backwards, because if they were to come in and say we ain't playing unless he's out, guess who's going to be out? Most likely going to be me.
You can't play.
Can't play. And so my point is that we work for them, and I feel like we've brought in the right kind of people in that locker room. The culture is the foundation to winning. Another thing I learned at Alabama is the culture is what helps you win. And talent is great, but if talent doesn't have the right kind of standards and the right kind of habits and behaviors, you don't end up on the right side of the ledger all the time. And so I'm most excited about the culture that's been created in the locker room. When you start throwing in the pieces to the puzzle, the players and the types of players, one of the things we pride ourselves on is the ability to evaluate, and we've done that, with a lot of people, as I like to call it, portaling. We use the portal to fill needs, but you can best and believe that our foundation of how we recruit will start with high school kids, because I want the consistency of bringing a kid along through my program, as opposed to every year having a different culture in the locker room because you've brought in 15 to 20 guys from some other programs that don't necessarily understand or know the standard of how we do things. And so, we're going to be a high school developmental program, and we know how to evaluate, we know how to recruit. Obviously, we have done a decent job developing. When you look at sending 7 guys to the combine this year, having 5 guys drafted, another first rounder. We've had 3 first rounders in the last 5 or 6 years. I think we're doing something right.
All right, and fans have a lot to expect this year.
I
pretty
feel
good players. Your
feel
offense seems loaded. And how do you feel about the defense?
Well, the defense to me has been the secret sauce, because a lot's made of the offense because scoring points is what people remember. But our defense under Brian Williams did a tremendous job a year ago. When you watch us, we were a first half team that maybe gave up some things, but then after the half, we did a tremendous job of adjusting and making the right decisions and moves to kind of slow people down. And I thought we finished playing great defense in the bowl game, holding NC State to field goals. I thought we did a really good job in the shutout, our first Big Ten shutout against Rutgers, that got us to our 7th win. And, I expect this year for us to be better, but that's the goal every year, to get a little bit better. We always talk about chasing that 1% every day. Well, every year our goal is to take the next step. And the next step is now not just being bowl eligible, but finding ways to win close games against some of the top teams in this league, which a year ago with Ohio State, Michigan, those were games that we had an opportunity. And this is not a knock because those guys won the game, but I thought we had opportunities to where, those margin of victories have shrunk considerably. And I like to see us continue that trend, but find a way to win a few of those games.
And keep this program a family, right?
Keep it a family, and maybe get some of those Ballou Knights and some of those DC natives to come across the Route 1 and come enjoy a game in the Shell. I'd love to see our our people here in this area come get behind the program, buy tickets, support us, man, because we've got a lot of homegrown talent right here. And to me, it's a fun program to support.
All right, Coach Mike Locksley, thanks for joining
Appreciate
us on Sideline
Former
Report.
Knight.
And we've got to talk again.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right, all the best.
Thanks.
After spending time with us, Coach Locksley headed over to the Maryland Baseball Stadium to support Maryland alum and Prince George's County native Matt Swope as he was introduced as the new Maryland baseball coach.
Matt Swope.
A DeMatha High grad and a University of Maryland baseball legend, Swope becomes the 9th head baseball coach in school history.
Just give me a few seconds to take this all in. Just seeing some of the faces that are out here today, Tommy Palucci, Mike Jones, Lox is out here, Brenda, Valman, all these guys that I've been here all my life and had some sort of relationship just means so much to me. It defines who I am. When I came in and interviewed with him, he asked me about the job. And I said, this isn't a job, this is a lifestyle. And it's always been that from the time that I was born. My relationships with coaches, other players from other teams, this truly is a family. So having you guys out here to support me today, I was not expecting, but very thankful and appreciative.
I think early on when I first took this job as the director of ops, you learn a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that most don't. Fundraising, budgeting, all these things that maybe as an assistant coach where you're just kind of recruiting and coaching that you miss out on. So I'm actually most thankful for my time back then because I learned a lot on how to be a head coach. Then obviously over the years, the experience and the relationships and the things like that throughout the department really helped. But it was really early on in my career that Coach Chef just kind of threw me all in to run the budget and do the fundraising and all these other things, which sometimes are the hardest part. So I'm thankful for that. There's not only pride from being from Maryland, but there's also definitely special pride coming from PG County. Both my parents grew up in PG County. I literally lived 5 minutes up the street in New Carrollton and Riverdale. Both my parents went to Duval High School. My uncle went to Parkdale when it first opened, and for me going to DeMatha Catholic High School, it's everything to me. So yes, extra special pride for PG County and Maryland, and it's a big part of how we recruit. How genuine it is for me, and the loyalty as well. It's an expensive sport. When you have to buy a glove and you have to buy a bat and you have to buy cleats, that makes it less accessible as opposed to just picking up one ball. So it comes from outreach. I'm going to be honest with you. We need more black players to play baseball again. I grew up with Ken Griffey Jr., Frank Thomas. Those were my favorite players growing up, and they shaped who I was as a player. So we need to do a better job with the outreach there where, some basketball and football is kind of beating us to that. So anyway, I can help Prince George's County or Maryland in general. I think we need to stop cookie cutting it and talk about it more and see what we can actually do by getting out there and having people participate. Because with the computers and social media and games, those are all tools and they're great, trust me, but there's just not, you're going out to the ball yard to play like it was when I grew up, when there was nothing else really to do. So we can't use that as an excuse. We have to have other avenues to try to grow the game.
Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of Sideline Report. I'd like to thank my guests for joining me. From the University of Maryland, I'm Marvin Jackson. We'll see you next time.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Thanks for hearing me out, bro.
Whenever you need to talk,
I'm here, okay?